questions is, why do people hoard? Well, we've already touched on the fact that it's a mental disorder, and very clearly that is not a lifestyle choice. It's not that they woke up one day and said, well, I just want to hoard my entire house and, be ridiculed and feel stigma and not be able to function. It's none of that. And they're a genetic component. 50% of people report someone in their family having had a hoarding disorder. I remember growing up, hearing about, everyone had that aunt or that uncle. You'd go to their house and, as a child, you'd be like, why do they have so much stuff? And they would say something, oh, she's a collector, or that's just grandpa, right. He's a pack rat or something like that. And we didn't know what it was then, but, that's what we were seeing. And it can be environmental. And I'm going to give, Dr. Hannan a chance to jump on in here. And many report having a stressful or traumatic event, but it does not always have to be a traumatic or stressful event. I know I hear a lot of people saying, well, they were in a car accident or they lost their mother and then they started to hoard, where it may have been they were already hoarding, but it escalated, if that makes sense. Dr. Hannan, you want to talk to that point on any of the things that I've already talked about?
Yeah, I mean, you'll definitely can see trauma can play a role in hoarding disorder, and people where their hoarding starts later in life, you more likely to see a trauma that was involved prior to this onset of hoarding disorder. So, I mean, it is definitely something to understand about people, because again, we kind of think about this. You mentioned, like, sometimes people look at it as this person is just lazy, and we have to understand there may be some traumatic event. Like you said, it could be related to losing someone that's important to them. But you oftentimes can see direct trauma to the person, where they might have been assaulted. It might have been a physical assault, sexual assault, some type of accident. So understanding that as you're working with someone with hoarding disorder, whether it's a family member or someone else, really understand that they may have a lot going on in their life. This is not just, I'm lazy, I don't want to throw it out.
Exactly.
And people may start earlier in their life, but we often don't catch it until they're on their own, because
exactly.
As a kid, most people, they have their parents that are cleaning up and monitoring this, but as you get older, it becomes more on you. The other thing you can look to is family members too. If you have multiple people in the same home hoarding, it's kind of hard to decide whose stuff is whose.
Exactly. It's all together, that one category pile that we talked about.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So those were excellent points. About the trauma, especially for sexual or physical assault, it becomes almost a protective place. No one can get in to harm me, or I don't have to get out to, where the bad thing happened or something like that. And another point that you made that was excellent, again, he's just on the excellent points, is most people don't know that hoarding can start in childhood. And he made a great point that it would be difficult to recognize unless you know what to look for, because parents are going to say, well, little Johnny, I need you to clean your room, or I need you to get rid of that rock collection, or you don't need 45 dolls. You need to give those to someone else. So children really control their own environment, but you can see some tenets of hoarding as early as age 11 and 15 in that age range, and then it will progress across the decades. So think about your average college student. In your 20s, you're learning who you are. You're probably out on your own, and you have that roommate who your side is immaculate and their side not so much. Or again, they have problems with, getting to class on time, or, you see them and they're stressing over discarding this, that, or the other, because again, in their 20s, it's starting to become more evident. And then in their 30s, they may experience that clinical impairment. Because, you're getting your job and you may be getting married, and then other people are seeing your behaviors more. And then, the severity increases as they get older. And that's why I think a lot of people think that this hoarding disorder is an elderly person's disorder. Because, that's generally when someone may be found out, again, because they're older, the children may have moved away, and someone has to come in because of an illness, or it's found out. So it really is a progressive disorder, a chronic disorder. And, Dr. Hannan, if you wanted to add anything to that, but I did want people to know that this is a spectrum. It can start, like he said, later in life due to a traumatic event, but it could be something that they've dealt with throughout their lifespan.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if you have someone who is a passive acquirer, so they're not actually out on the streets getting things, they just over a lifetime have accumulated a lot of things. So I had a couch, I bought a new couch. I just never got rid of the old couch. It can kind of, over
Yes.
years, it kind of builds and builds and builds. I think one of the things that where we see it more as people get older is that there are more limitations then physically getting around. Now you've got children that are trying to attend to their parents and take care of them, whereas before they really didn't have much say. Now where you see children start to parent their parent, they get
Yes.
more involved, and families start thinking more about what's going to happen here. So even as they think about the home, as someone may have to eventually leave the house and downsize to a smaller place, they're thinking we need to work on this because, we need to downsize, and we just can't have you living like this. It's not safe. Even maybe regardless of the hoarding, they need a smaller place, something that's more safer for them. And so it becomes a bigger issue as people get older in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I think that's why, people tend to think of it as an older person's disease when that may not necessarily be the case. But you touched on some things. You're not able to take care of yourself as much, or again, the children may come in and start making more decisions, and calling in experts and help to help their elderly parents. But again, I've had clients along the entire spectrum of age ranges. I'm sure
Yep.
You have as well, men and women. Although most of my clients tend to be females. But of course, I've had male clients as well. So we want to make sure that we want everyone to know that hoarding does not discriminate. Let's be very clear. It does not care whether you are rich or poor. It does not care whether you are, a genius or, just very smart. It does not care about your race, your gender, or any of that. It can affect you. So it's not what I want people to recognize and understand, that it's not who you are. It's just the disorder that you're dealing with. So it doesn't define you. It shouldn't define who you are. And again, it does not discriminate. So, let's dispel that myth right off of the bat. And Dr. Hannan, we were going to talk about the OCD hoarding relationship, but you did such a great job of doing that already. So I appreciate that you did that. And then we were going to talk about, is there a typical person who hoards? And I kind of just said, hoarding doesn't discriminate, but we do see some, we can say that, we've seen more of this versus that, maybe more females than males, older versus younger, along that. Do you have anything that you would add to, is there a typical person who hoards, or is that one of the myths we need to dispel?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's typical things that you would see with hoarding behaviors, but I don't know that there's necessarily a typical person. I think, what we tend to see are the things that are more sensational, right? So if you're watching a program, of course, you're going to see someone that has bigger piles than somebody else. The person who there's a major problem where there's the big hole in the roof. They can't find several animals because that's what is going to be more interesting to the viewer. But there are certainly people here, we mentioned before, that you would have no idea that they had this problem.
Exactly.
They may be, someone that you work with. It may be someone that, in the community, you just haven't been into their home. I think that the typical things that we wind up looking for are some of the reasons that people might hold on to things.
Right.
People hold on to things because they associate them with good memories. They hold on to them because they could be used someday. We talked about before, they may be holding on because somebody else might use it. They may be holding on to things for sentimental reasons. So there are different kinds of patterns of thinking. We see differences amongst people, but like almost categories of people and how they acquire. Certain people that are going to acquire by picking up things to the side of the road, or going to a flea market, or going to consignment shops. And then some people, it's more passive. They just have mail coming in and it just accumulates over time. Or as you mentioned before, friends, neighbors give them things because, hey, I'm the guy that likes to reuse things. So people are going to give me things. So I think we tend to see patterns, even kind of things that people hold on to.
Yes.
We talked before, you got people that where it's trash and it's dangerous and it's, decomposing food. But we also see people where it's just papers, it's clothing, it's things that any one of us would hold on to, but they just have more and they can't cut it down. So I think it's probably more typical in terms of there's certain kind of categories of behaviors that we see.
Exactly.
But I don't know that you can say they're the typical person.
Well, good. We dispelled that myth. Because there is no typical person who hoards. Like Dr. Hannan said, we would look for behaviors in those people, but not. So there's not. You couldn't have a sketch artist come in and say, "Well, draw me a picture of someone who hoards," because that would be unfair, and so that's not true. So we dispelled
one
that.
thing I would say though, and something that my colleagues talk a lot about is there's a different way of thinking, and we haven't quite captured it. I mean, some of the research is looking at seeing what's going on with the brain and things like that, but it's not always so clear. But sometimes, and I know you probably have the same experience too, when you talk to someone that has problems with hoarding disorder, they have a way of looking at the world and describing their world that there's just a certain way you start talking to them, and you're like, there's something going on here, and I can't quite even explain it. I wish I could, but it's this almost experience that I have sometimes with people where you'll ask them a question, and sometimes they tell you this kind of really go in this roundabout way of telling you, and it's on point, but if your brain doesn't seem like it's following the point, but then you're like, at the end of it, you're like, okay, I can sort of follow that, but
right. They took the scenic route where we would have taken maybe, the expressway.
Yeah.
We all end up in the same place, and it's interesting.
That's a very good way to put it. I like that. I'm going to use that now.
You heard it here first. It's yours. And it's interesting that you said that, because we were talking about, I call Dr. Hannan my brain man, because there was, some interesting research on, looking at the brain of someone who has a hoarding disorder, and how, there are differences, and they're starting to do, brain imaging and things. Have you had any experience in that arena, Dr. Hannan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not personally involved in that research, but my colleagues are. And it really is interesting. What's that?
I said he knows people, and I know
people. And they do the brain scans right behind. Go that way outside my building, and you'd see where they do the brain scans.
He's going to take you on a tour. No, I'm kidding. No, he's not.
No, but it's actually some really interesting research. And I think it really goes back to what you've talked about, is not just looking at people as being lazy. So one of the things that you see is there's a region of the brain that is kind of looks at sort of errors and mistakes that we make in the world. And so my colleagues, they've done research and looking. This is really interesting.
I'm sure.
You would take so people enter like an MRI machine, and they start shredding material. So they ask them questions like, can we shred this item? And some of those materials are just things that don't belong to this person. And sometimes what we have in some research they've done is where the people actually bring in some of their own mail, like junk mail.
Yes.
And what you'll see is when they are being asked to discard the materials that belong to them, the parts of the brain that are associated with error monitoring are going up. They're flashing, right? Other people's mail, it's not on so much. It's actually kind of less active than the actual average person. So you're seeing here that this is not just about, I'm lazy, I don't want to do it, I want to hold on to it because I want what I want.
Right.
Their brain is telling them that something is going wrong here. And, for us, it might be something where we have that experience where I'm about to pick up some wire on the ground, and then my brain's like, wait a minute, is that a live wire? We're like, whoa.
It's hot.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Dangerous. Yeah. Their brain is doing something like that when we're asking them to throw out something that belongs to them. So we've really got to understand that they're not doing it just because I want what I want and I'm being stubborn. Right. It's their brain is reacting the way that most of us would be like, before I do anything, I really have to think about this, because this could be a mistake. This could be a wrong decision that I'm making here.
That is fascinating. And wouldn't life be grand if every time we made a mistake or a bad choice, we could have something that, like a portable machine that says, no, don't do that. or to, help dispel the myths that, okay, I am not doing this because, like you said, I want to do it. This is what my brain is telling. So people could see, right? It wouldn't be so internal. There would be a light that would go off and say, no, I'm not doing this to bother you. I'm not doing it difficult. I'm not doing this because I'm having a tantrum. I'm doing this because this is what my brain is telling me. And so my body is following suit. That would be, we should work on inventing that.
We'll just wear a hat and we can see what's going on with it.
You heard it here first. We'll make it cute. It just goes off. But that is fascinating research. And again, to know that it's right behind you. Tour. I'm kidding. Okay. So we're going to wrap this up because we're going to talk about some of the effects of hoarding that we kind of touched on already. And then we're going to wrap up with the treatment. And if time allows, we're going to talk about our time on hoarding. Thank you again for taking the time to stop by my channel. And before you leave, give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification. Do me one other favor, tell at least 5 people you know about my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And if no one has told you today how awesome you are, I want you to know that you are absolutely, positively awesome. Take care. God bless. Bye.